mean, there's a movement called the transhumanist movement,
Right,
which,
right.
So for Nietzsche, not quite yet in this world of these extreme what I would call these super technologies, but
Right.
it's almost like, there is a sense in there, like we have to overcome our human nature, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one thing we want, if we're going to become like gods,
Yeah.
creating our own values, creating our own reality in a sense, then we sort of need the power to do that. And we have to overcome whatever might be some limitations.
Yeah.
Now he's trying to think through that, right? But now, 100 years plus years later, there are certain people are looking at certain technologies, actually things that we've made with our hands and our minds, as possible things we could possibly like almost synthesize ourselves with to complete this transformation. It's a very scary thought, but I don't know if you want, like, because I've seen Nietzsche references like in some of these contemporary thinkers who are often engineers and stuff as the first transhumanist.
Yes. Well, should we call him the first transhumanist? He's certainly paves the way. I mean, I think there were several converging lines of intellectual and cultural history that make transhumanism ripe at this moment. I mean, so one of them is Darwinism, right? Two of the upshots from this whole thing is, one, the human being is fundamentally biological. And then later we tack on psychology and psychological. But most people think the psychology is biologically driven. And human nature is a moving target for Darwin because, who knows what it'll be? It depends on environmental pressures and random mutations. Well, so you already have the conceptual framework. And then you get to Nietzsche and he says, no, there's no human nature, right? There's no, because there are no universals, there's no transcendent, there's no metaphysics of the person.
Right. There are only individual humans. They're just particular, discrete particulars.
Yeah, exactly. And that gets picked up by the existentialist, and Sartre is famous for the existence precedes essence.
Right.
Because there's no God, there's no idea of what a person is. Yeah. There's no human nature. And some of his applications are the same as Nietzsche's. We have to create our own natures. And I think Carl Trueman has traced some of these things into the expressive individualism, borrowing from Taylor. I know you've worked on the Frankfurt School. Yeah. And Taylor says, like, some of those guys sexualize psychology, or politicize sexuality. Yeah. So now everything's political. Yeah. And so there are all these different trends that are not completely independent.
Yeah, I mean, the way I wrote in one of their, like, I don't know if I said Nietzsche did. Maybe it was at some point, like, everything gets reduced down to will and word, right? And you're saying words would be the political.
Yes.
And will would be the individual. And like politics could be construed as a techne, right? It's a techne for how we're going to transform reality. And so that's, that's all related. And then you still have that. I mean, I think the critical theory, that comes out of Marxism and Frankfurt School is very much a techne, because there is no human, there's no way we're supposed to be. So we need to develop a techne, call it here politics, and almost like maybe even like rhetoric, because you think of just the whole consternation in the last 20 years over how to use language. Right. And if you say something you're wrong, you're canceling a person.
Yes.
Or you're making them non-existent just in virtue of the words you use. And then now we have the more of a hard technology, coming at us, where politics isn't working. Let's try just actually computers.
Right. So think about this. So you mentioned this conference where people are starting to push back. That's evidence of this pushback, and there is a pushback among some academics. I think quite a minority, of academics, Christian thinkers, and as well as thinkers that are amenable to the broadly Christian story in terms of human beings and ethics and culture and this kind of thing. In my darker moments, I think that's like erecting a Lego thing to stop a bulldozer
or something,
right? Because the other social trend is the power of the manipulation of economics and the power of advertising to shape people's aspirations and people's sense of what is good and true and beautiful, or what do we do if there is no good, true, and beautiful. And a bunch of old guys at a conference in Oxford will have I'm being bleak here. And I'm an old guy, right? I'm just not.
Well, now this was a fairly young group of people. I think this is a new conference, but
okay, maybe so, but still, academics. Can academics help shape the context for 14-year-olds? And yes, but there are powerful forces at work to shape these things in other directions.
I mean, the thing is, the politics is a technique, in a sense, we're very familiar with it. We know how propaganda, we have a sense of it's kind of a way of shaping the person that we can combat. But I think what's scary now is this actual technology, whether it be AI or biotech. This is something like, we've had several people on the podcast where we're like, this is an unknown. We do not know how well, or if we can really resist this level of, we've had Dr. Emily Stevens on, who's a friend, several times, and she's all over this because it is, it feels at least like something we've never seen before. This level of shaping capability on the mind and the soul of the individual.
Yeah, so let me float this. So Nietzsche has a quip which I find really helpful. He says, "What is decisive against Christianity now is our taste, not our reason." That's Gay Science 132. And he, of course, he delighted in that. Part of his work was to make his readers kind of have a repugnance
for
Christianity.
Right.
I think we have to do the academic work and argue, but it's much more important, or what will be much more effective, is to combine the academic work with the aesthetic work, and to hold forth a vision of life that's beautiful, that's different, and rather than arguing someone into thinking, oh, maybe there is human nature. We have to start asking questions like, but what kind of person do you want to be?
Right.
What kind of relationships do you want? Do you want to be known and loved? Do you want to be a patient person? I tell my students that the fruit of the Spirit, that verse in Galatians, might be the most important Bible verse in apologetics. Right? You just show it to somebody and say, isn't this kind of what we all desperately want?
Well, and I think that too is reason why figures like maybe Pascal and Kirkwood are also becoming. We also need to sort of recapture some of their legacy and thinking, because they're pointing out more of a direct aesthetic sort of witness to the goodness of Christianity, when goodness comes often through some display of beauty, harmony, and we need a better Christian art in that sense as well. I mean, we are supposed to be the great artwork of God walking around on our two legs, understood, but then there's also representation in other forms. And I think, I do think Carl Trueman mentioned this in Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, that was one of his points. Like, we need a better Christian aesthetic as well.
Yeah. Now,
Uh,
let me jump in and report what I take to be the good news.
yeah,
There's never been a better time to be a serious artist and a Christian in 150 years, right? The church is actually emerging as a place for real artists. It's
yeah,
it's slow, but it's like light years ahead of when I was an undergraduate. And the I mean, there are places where it's better than others, but
yeah,
there are real serious artists and filmmakers and poets, and the church is starting to get past the idea that art should be didactic and should teach people the way to Jesus. Um,
yeah. Okay. I mean, we could do another. I mean, I have a good friend of mine is a published poet.
mhm.
You had him in class, Riley Bounds. It's a
Yeah,
good
yeah,
friend of
Riley.
mine.
Hmm.
And we talk about this quite a bit.
Hmm.
Um, and because I do have a platonic streak in me
Yeah.
that has my concerns about representation,
Hmm.
artistic representation, and the problems as it's associated with us getting a grasp on truth or the
Hmm.
real, right? But then it's clear that we do need beauty in the
Yeah.
world, and we need to use the what I to use technical terms, the communicable attribute of
Yeah.
creativity of our that our Creator gives us in such
Hmm.
a way to draw people to Christ. I think that might be a reason why maybe why some evangelicals are gravitating towards other traditions like
Mm.
Roman Catholicism or Eastern Orthodoxy that
Yep.
seem to have a better grasp on how to encounter God through
Yep.
art or
Hmm.
artistic expression. So I'm always battling because I also having been Catholic now, probably have
Yep.
some, I have theological concerns
Hmm.
as well about art and artistic representation because
Yep.
I think it can lead to problems. But yeah, and
But think about Aristotle's poetics rather than Plato's,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So Plato has a, a work of art is far removed from reality because it's a
right,
copy of a copy.
copy, yeah,
Aristotle says no, and he's thinking of drama here. Um, the universal can be revealed in the
yeah,
concrete story,
yeah,
and the audience can experience a catharsis of emotion that may, and now to Christianize his picture a little bit, to help them be receptive to a new vision of what it means to be human.
yeah,
And I was in a conversation with a couple of artists. I was at a reception out at a crew conference with a bunch of artists, and they were young. One was a poet, one was a painter, and they say, "Well, you're a philosopher. What should we be working on?"
hmm,
And I thought for a long time, and I said, I think you should work on what it means to be human, right? And anything that's really about our humanity is gospel territory. And and
yeah.
and the goal of the artist is, uh, I'm on a soapbox here. Sorry. The goal
No,
of the
this is good.
artist
Yeah,
is not to tell us anything, but is to help us ask the important questions.
yeah.
And
I mean, yeah, again, so or if there is a didactic
mhm.
um aspect to it,
Yeah,
it can't be just so explicit and so direct
right.
that you lose. I mean, it has to
Mhm.
be subtle. It has to sort of
Mhm.
like move the person in a direction,
Mhm.
but not just through it's it can't just be through propositions. It can't just be
Right,
through
right.
telling, directly through propositions.
Mhm.
It's gotta work in a different, it's working in a different mode
Yeah,
towards a teachable something that is, I mean, there was a good
yeah,
book
that's
by,
good.
I don't think he was a Christian philosopher, James Young, called
Mhm.
Art and Knowledge that
Huh,
I've
I don't know
referenced
that one.
before,
Yeah.
where he does argue that to be a true work of art, it should convey knowledge.
Mhm.
Now
But
people, but I mean,
okay,
distinguish between knowledge and didactic, but that something
you
of
know,
knowledge has to get.
I think, I mean, I think of Lewis in his when he used the illustration. Oh, he talks about our imaginations are kind of crippled, and we need our imaginations to be expanded, and that I think is the role of art.
Well, and he's working in the heyday of the positivists, so he is where all this
he
stuff
definitely
gets
was
thrown out because it's not scientifically right.
Yeah. Anyway, that is for another topic, but
we'll do it again. That was interesting.
Well, I've said everything I know about art, so I'm done.
Well, I did a talk on paganism at Biola. For Ratio Christi a couple months ago, and I had several art students in there.
Oh, good.
And we ended on that topic, like, well, how if the culture is taking more of a spiritual shift, not necessarily a Christian a shift towards Christianity, but just the spirituality more generally, and neo-paganism is certainly on the rise. Like, how could we respond with? Because I was talking about the very sensate nature of paganism, right? That pagan religion relies a lot on the sensate, the stimulation of the senses, at least the kind, so like, what's going to be a Christian, how Christians respond? Well, we'll need good art of our own, and we'll need it to be pedagogical in the sense of we'll have to discern beauty from ugliness.
Yes.
Will be more important in sense than the truthfulness of a proposition from the falsehood of the proposition.
Yeah.
Can you discern what is beautiful versus something that is grotesque or ugly?
Yeah.
Right.
But I also think we can't afford to leave the sensate to the neo-pagans. It's like Christianity is very sensate, right? We think of the opening sentences of 1 John. What we have heard, what we have seen, what we touched with our hands is what we proclaim to you.
Yeah.
It's pretty powerful, right?
Yeah.
And
God became sensate.
Yes. It's dramatic.
Yeah.
So I think there can be, and you're not doing this, but there can be a fear among some Christians that, well, if the pagans are doing this, I don't want to get near it.
Don't do
it.
Right.
Rather than saying, well, the pagans are doing this because they're made in the image of God and they're onto something. Yeah. We can do it better because we have a thicker, true understanding of the relationship between physicality and spirit, physicality and mind, and we kind of have nothing to fear. And you think, well, what if somebody looks at your movie and becomes a neo-pagan? Well, that might happen, right? But
it could also be a stage in a journey, depending.
It's a stage in a journey.
If they're some kind of strict, hardcore atheistic materialists, you've got at least, it's. Look, I would say, and then we'll get back to Nietzsche and wrap up. Look, it's the long tradition of the church. I mean, I'm going through the first 7 centuries. I'm going through all of Schaff right now. Started at Clement of Rome and working my way through. I'm in the middle of Tertullian right now, but I mean, all the apologists, that technical term for the first, several of the first early fathers, Justin Martyr. I mean, that's what they're doing. I mean, they're pointing out in the culture. So you've got a long tradition of apologetics, looking at what the pagans did, given general revelation and common grace.
Yep.
And got some things there.
Yeah.
Now we'll fill in the rest. Now let's,
I like that.
Give the rest of the story, so to say. So I think that just is a continuation of what the church has really always been doing.
Yep.
We just got to do a little bit better.
Yeah. I mean,
and I've seen better. I mean, we've seen better in recent.
Being human
I still go back to classics, some of the classic movies, even if we're talking movies. But go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The journey is fraught with difficulties.
Yeah.
Right. These things, and that's what makes it a journey that's worthy of image bearers. Yeah. In some ways, and so, for artists, I think about what it means to be human. Try to do things that help people ask questions like that.
Yeah.
And at least then you're moving in a direction that could be kingdom oriented without being so didactic that you know, you become a Hallmark card.
Right. But I think it's relevant to Nietzsche because again,
Yeah.
he starts with the Homeric
Yes.
poems,
Yeah.
right? And the poets. And that, you might even say that's kind of what inspires him initially in his initial, of course, he goes the wrong direction
Sure.
at some point. But the poems of Homer over and against the didacticism of Socrates,
Yep. That's exactly right.
And as Christians, we say, well, we can do both. We can do both. We can be the poet and the philosopher, the analytic thinker and the more synthetic,
right,
and representative, or in the sense of aesthetics.